But so we'll take it from there. Just so for everyone's information, we have 27 participants, and that's good to see. Good to see some of the IDOs from interstate. And over to you, Apollo.
Thanks, Rachel, and then thank you for the invite to speak about. If those of you guys have been on the webinar for the last few minutes, it is a long pathogen name, and I've broken it down. So if you can repeat after me, I usually pronounce it by saying Neopestalotiopsis. All right. Now I've changed slides, so hopefully you can see the format of my talk for this morning. So I'll go and briefly talk about the inquiries I've had of late, and then I'll go into my experiences with the pathogen and some of the work, or at least some of the mention of the Neopestalotiopsis pathogen overseas. And I'll do a quick summary of that, and then we'll go to Natalia, and obviously we'll have some discussions afterwards. So in terms of what I've seen when the sun did come up a couple of weeks ago, and growers have also been sending samples in through their agronomist or directly. So I've walked patches, at least disease blocks, or at least plants with significant losses of about 50 to 60%. In some cases, obviously, the plants have all died. In most, you can kind of like see there's a lot of that dying leaves or leaves with chlorotic or necrotic symptoms. And when I've taken some samples of them and then cut through longitudinally, there was actually not too many crown rot, as you can see there. And most of the time, initially at least, my oscillations in the lab, I tend to look at the crowns, obviously because plants have died or had that wilting symptom. Initially, that's what I did. But obviously in the last, say, month or so, I did start concentrating more on the leaves. So you can see those little triangle of cuts through what I would call a single leaf spot, and spots or the lesions where they've sort of coalesced and come together. And so in terms of the recoveries I've had in the lab, there's a whole array. And usually when I see these recoveries, I tend to kind of like put it down to something that is not consistently from one or two pathogens.
That's right.
And over the last few weeks, I have also looked at leaf oscillations and
yeah, whatever you can see.
Can we just get everyone on mute, please, while we're in the session?
Thanks, Jen. So the one here that you can see that have the white hyphae mycelium and have these black what I would call spore, that would be the spores, I guess. This is the Neopestalotiopsis as it appears in my PDA plates. So this one was taken directly from leaves. So that tells us that in our leaves, definitely the Neopestalotiopsis pathogen is there. In the crowns, I think the Neopestalotiopsis is also sort of like extending down, but you still get your fusariums and maybe perhaps another kind of like couple of other diseases as well, or pathogens as well. So just to summarize what I did receive thus far, so these are around 15 inquiries from producers. On the left of the table are what I would call pathogens of at least known to us, or at least are always present. So you get your Phytophthora, your Fusarium, Coleototricum, Alternaria, Rhizopus obviously can also cause leaf spot, and Neopestalotiopsis down the bottom. The others, that just means there's other unknowns that are obviously present, but I obviously can't identify them. So, and these are recorded, or I'll put it down from the initial inquiry. So, the number one would be probably about 3 weeks after planting. So that would have been as early as April. And then the 15 probably soon, as late as last week. And so you can see that there's obviously Phytophthora. Given the weather we've had, there's Phytophthora present, or at least recovered. There's a whole lot of Fusarium present as well, but Fusarium does have a lot of different species involved, and it's one of your typical soil pathogens or saprophytes that are present, ever present. There's also Colototricum present that can produce leaf spots. Alternaria can also produce leaf spots, but again, it's not a significant pathogen to us. Couple of incidents of Rhizopus, but the Neopestalotiopsis, up to about the 8th sampling time, I've only just concentrated on the crowns, but obviously at the 8th or beyond that, I have started to get it to do leaf isolations by themselves. And so obviously we have picked up, or I have picked them up more. It would have been nicer to get some more of as well, but obviously these are just the ones I'm working with now. And again, Pestalotiopsis is there, but you do also have those other pathogens involved as well. But maybe I can't say that it was probably the dominant one, especially in these last 3 that I got or recovered. So my experiences with Neopestalotiopsis, it's a fungal pathogen that has been recorded previously in Queensland from strawberry. So I'll make that clear. It has been reported previously in Queensland from strawberry samples. And when I did recover them, mainly from leaves and crown tissues, and mainly associated with the known fungal pathogens that we have. So that includes your Colototricum, your Phytophthora, and your Macrophthalmina. However, it is not classified as the primary pathogen causing diseases. So I tend to, and then most of the other labs would consider it as a secondary invader or colonizer. Typically can recover it when plants are undergoing stress or stressful conditions, but it has not been significant and has not been a major concern for industry until now, perhaps, when obviously when we've had these conditions that has been harsh in terms of our production. This is a picture of leaf symptoms in my glasshouse. I do remember this one. We had like 7-day rain straight, and we did leave the overhead irrigation on. And after when things settled down, we did see an explosion of leaf spot that obviously have become severe, that it's obviously transferred down to the crown, and have, I lost some of the pots, but certainly the rain and the conditions did play a part, plus the leaving the overhead irrigations on for those days. Also, I did work with this pathogen from a pathogenicity testing. So what I did with these ones is I actually had 2 different strains or species of Neopestalotiopsis. And in these studies, I did a root dipping on the pathogen, but I also sprayed the pathogen onto the plants to mimic like an aerial sort of inoculation. However, at 8 weeks after inoculation, there was any plants that died. There would have been some leaf spotting, but it did not translate to plant deaths in those 8 weeks. I left the trial to go on for 20 weeks, which is 5 months, but only about 16% of the plants that did die, I was able to recover the pathogen. I should make a mention that it was not subjected to wet conditions. I just left it on the table and allowed the pathogen to do its thing, but I did not give that wet conditions. Maybe perhaps that's why it didn't become much more severe. Yes, I did lose some plants, maybe because I didn't give it any fungicide treatment, because I really wanted the pathogen to obviously take its course. But I think because I didn't subject it to the wet conditions, it didn't show the symptoms that we're seeing now in the field. Um, some of the treatments you can see here, the white tag is the untreated or the no pathogen. The yellow and the pink tags are two different species of Neopestalotiopsis. And you can see that there are some leaves that have died, but they're all in all the treatments. So even in the control, the senescing leaves, I guess, is just part of the strawberry, the strawberry plant. But there's no significant differences in terms of the leaf spotting and how harsh it did get. So I guess I just take that back to that. I did not subject it to the wet conditions as we're seeing now. Overseas, as early as 1976, there's been reports of Neopestalotiopsis causing decay on petioles. Also on leaf spots, it has been recorded, but essentially, I guess it's just been recently over the last 5 to 8 years where it's been associated with plant losses. In several countries, the US, Spain, Belgium, Brazil, Egypt, and then obviously in the last probably 2 or 3 years, it has been more prevalent in a number of the US states. And I'm just going to refer to one of the work that Natalia did. In terms of the factors that the pathogen is favored by, it is spread by water. So that wind-driven rain that we've had over the last few weeks, obviously irrigation and water splash could all contribute. In terms of the temperature, 20 degrees, but it does have a broad range of temperature between the 10s and the 30s where disease could still be, that the pathogen could still be active. However, actually the leaf wetness is the one that plays an important role in terms of the disease development. So, I think if you've had, 2 or 3 days where it's consistently wet, I think that's where the pathogen does become more destructive. Weeds, alternate host, and infected crop debris may also be playing a part in terms of sources of inoculum. In terms of management, on the report, it does say to use disease-free plants and runners in the first instance. Limit field operations when plants are wet to minimize the spread. Switch, Starum, Captan, and group-free fungicides seem to have reduced incidence of the pathogen. And also those 3 groups, or at least those 4 that I mentioned, are all part of our system in strawberries in Australia. And in the study done by Natalia, also actives fluazinum and chlorothalonil also reduced incidence of Neopestalotiopsis. I should give a warning.
Yeah.
I should give a warning. These guys are not registered for strawberry production, so please don't go sourcing out fluazinum and chlorothalonil and put it on your crops, because last thing we want is unregistered chemical residues in our fruit.
Yeah.
The actives fluazinum is actually used in the runner nurseries in Australia. There is a permit for gem fungicide, and that is for control of powdery mildew and pneumoniopsis. It does seem to have, according to the study, some benefits for Neopestalotiopsis, and I believe it does, and also for Coleototricum as well. Mm-hmm. And for chlorothalonil, people will know that as Bravo, I believe. I wouldn't go using Bravo in fruit, because in the previous study we've done, it does produce a white residue on fruit. So there is more work that needs to be done if people want to pursue Bravo in our system.
Yeah. Hello.
Yep.
we might just have a little pause there. One of the things I wanted to be really clear about, and perhaps you can clarify, is whilst management is to use disease-free certified runners, the runners that have had this issue with sweets runners that had the pesticide issue, whilst they are not certified, they were considered to be disease-free. So the reason they are not certified is because of the use of the glyphosate issue. It's nothing to do with them being more diseased.
Yeah.
So I
I
think
know that's right. And this is just speaking in general terms.
yes, but I think because this is such a hot issue this year, I think it's really important that we're very clear that whilst those runners are not certified, it is not because they are carrying this disease. And from
there's no evidence of that either.
yeah, and the conversations that I've been having around the ridges is that it is emerging in plants that
Oh yes.
are not necessarily from sweets.
Yeah.
So there is no line to be drawn between those two issues.
No problems. Yep, that's right.
Okay, cool. Keep going, please.
And yeah, and so going back to the fungicides, the fluazinum is part of the nursery system, and we did do an initial analysis of residue on fruit when we were doing that work previously, and it does show to be residual. After 7 days, fluazinum is still detected in fruit, so that's why it is a better fit in the nursery sector. And that's probably something to talk about later in terms of making sure that we do have a strategy towards doing separate groups of fungicides in the nursery sector and the fruit sector. In terms of, I touched on alternate host previously, it does have a wide host range looking at the literature overseas. It's on apples, avocado, it's in our cousins, the blueberry, it's in ginger, grapevine, and macadamias. We have macadamias in Queensland. So it's been reported in these and many more, including weeds. It also occurs in soil, in leaf litter, perhaps in our inrows, in bark-headed trees. So it tells us it's everywhere. And even in eucalyptus leaves, and especially if we're favored by long periods of leaf wetness. And we do have eucalyptus trees everywhere as well in our area. So it tells us this pathogen is everywhere. You guys may have seen my recommendations for the protectant program for strawberries and winter production. If you planted in the couple of weeks of March, probably really great weather. If you're like me, who got their runners in April, you would have been planting in the rain, same as me. And week after that, it did rain some more. And I'm thinking, great, I don't have to put my overheads on. It can help with establishment. But then we just continued to get more rain over the last few weeks. We did get some sun appearing last week of May, and obviously a little bit overcast today, but you can probably agree we've had some really good sunlight over the last few days, and we do have more forecasts of sunlight this coming week. But essentially, that has been our conditions over the last 2 months. So just to summarize that, the pathogen is not a new pathogen in strawberry, and at least in Queensland as well. The combination of events that may have contributed to the increased incidence, the pathogen has a wide host range and appears to be everywhere, as I mentioned. Favorable weather conditions for disease development, and also because of that, we haven't really been able to apply the effective fungicide sprays we used to do if the weather was fine. So now that we're all, obviously about 10 weeks into production, we would have had that continuous protection all throughout. But essentially, we're just starting last week in terms of putting our protectants on. So that 7-8 weeks obviously has been challenging because disease severity has been on, but also we just haven't been able to go in there. If we did go in there, probably would have been washed up or diluted because of the rain. And as mentioned, the leaf wetness, extended periods of leaf wetness does play a part according to the studies. We do have the registered products available to manage this pathogen. But again, if we're not able to go in there because of the conditions, it's not going to work, regardless if it's new or existing products. Accurate diagnosis is important to be able to apply appropriate measures. As you saw in some of those inquiries, Neopestalotiopsis wasn't even a part of it. Phytophthora has a different control measure against those pathogens. Colletotricum is different. So it's always good to get an accurate diagnosis of what is going on. And again, I am happy if you guys want to send your samples to private diagnostic labs, that's fine. I am happy to receive as many if you guys want to send them in, or get your agronomist to send them to me. In terms of what we can do, we can study the pathogen epidemiology more, and you know, study the different strains or isolates. In Florida, they have found that different strains are more aggressive. So similar to COVID, Omicron is much more. Is it the more aggressive or not? But you could have the same pathogen, but have different strains that are more aggressive. So that would be an interesting thing to study up on. We can look at alternative chemistries. Uh, I would support different groups if there is, and also to extend on that, we should further optimize the fungicide strategy between the nursery and fruit sectors. I was able to do that with powdery mildew, where we have different products in the nurseries and different products in the fruit farms, so that we're able to have you know, one batch of controls against another. But perhaps, you know, switch is a main topic because it's used in both sectors, and we have a new product in Mervyn Prime that have come on board, which has the same components as Switch. So if we're putting them on, we're essentially accelerating the resistance or the chemical resistance from developing. So I'd like to be involved in any regulatory you know, discussions about what chemistry should be included, but unfortunately chemical companies will do their thing, and we'll register. You know, you guys know there is a raft of group 7 chemicals coming, and we have already 3 or 4 different group 7s already in the system, and for more to come. It's just, I think for me anyway, it's spelling trouble. Long term, we could also look at sources of resistance, variety susceptibility, and obviously breeding, incorporate resistance into our breeding program. And I do know the breeder who is here in DAF in Nambour, so we can look at you know, doing something against Neopestalotiopsis. But again, breeding will take a bit of time, but long term we can look at that. In terms of what we can do now, hygiene, clean up as much as you can, and that's possible. Obviously, you can't remove all the leaves, but clean up as much of the dead, decaying plant parts as you can. While you're removing them, just keep in mind you are creating more wounds for potential pathogens to come in if the rain does come back. So do apply one of your systemic fungicides when you do clean up. And obviously, when the conditions allow, continue with the protectant program and come back to that, just so that we're getting that continuous protection for strawberry. Again, I am happy to stand up in front of anybody who's criticizing us for spraying weekly. Scientifically, there is basis to that, because we are always creating wounds for pathogens to come in. And it's important for us to always protect the plants from those incursions. If the forecast remains the same, i.e. that is the above average rain to maintain over winter, please keep up your hygiene. And as some of the work from Natalia's group said, you just got to limit the operations while the plants are wet. If we can get the plants to obviously dry down, then we can come in to clean up and to apply those protectants or the systemic fungicides. Thank you for your attention. That finishes my presentation. If you do need to send any samples to me, there is my contact details and my phone number. I can come and visit as well if you need. Also, alternatively, there is Grow Help Australia, so you can contact them or send them some samples through this contact and address. And I'll finish there, Rach, and let you introduce Natalia.
Thank you very much, Apollo. So I think that was very comprehensive and helpful. What we might do is we'll certainly, if it's okay with you, Apollo, send this presentation to anyone who wants it. So maybe Jen, attach it to, are you, actually, I should just check, are you comfortable for this to go onto an email, Apollo, or would you prefer?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
yep.
Well, we'll work out how to get it as broadly as possible out to people. And then I will flick to Natalia to just give a bit of a perspective from the US, and then we'll open the discussion to questions.
All right. So do you want me just to go over what we're seeing in
Yes,
Florida
please,
and the
and-
US?
Yes,
Okay.
thanks.
So for us, we first seen the disease in the 2017-18 season. So we've been dealing with this for about 5 years now. And that first year when it showed up, it was very limited. It was only 5 growers that had plants at that time from one particular nursery that had the issue, and it was pretty significant for those growers, but it was limited on the extent of for the entire industry. But it has been since then expanding. The following season, we had more growers that had the issue, and in a second nursery in Canada that had an issue at the time, and it turned out the nursery in Canada had plant stock from the original nursery that had the issue. And since then, it's really expanded in our industry. More growers that are affected, and also more nurseries that have been affected. And now, not only in Florida, when it first showed up, it was only in Florida. Now there are reports in several different states in the US. And initially, we were able to link the problem to that same original nursery. But now, since it's been 4 years, it's hard to see that link anymore, because many nurseries and many growers have been affected. As Apollo mentioned, Neopestalotiopsis is not new to strawberries. We always had Neopestalotiopsis, mainly, as he said, on plants that were weak or stressed for some reason. That's definitely not the case of what we see now in Florida. It seems from, and I'm speaking for Florida, I don't know what's going on in Australia yet, but it seems we are dealing with what might be a new species of Neopestalotiopsis that's more aggressive in strawberry, and particularly more aggressive on the leaves, as I can see in your pictures too. It seems like you're also dealing with a strain that's more aggressive in the leaves, which was not as common for what we're seeing with this pathogen before. It has been very challenged to manage this disease in years when it's been wet, and that seems pretty much what you've been dealing with this season in Australia. The past season that just finished for us, the 21-22 season, it was actually not as bad for our industry, because the weather was much drier than previous seasons. So as far as fungicides and cultivar resistance, we're really not seeing much as far as cultivars that has good levels of resistance. So our breeding program is having to work really hard and really fast, trying to come up with cultivars and make crosses with cultivars that are more resistant. There are sources of resistance out there, which is the good news. But breeding takes time, so it's going to take a few years before we can incorporate that resistance into new cultivars. In the meantime, what we have to manage is fungicides and cultural practices, which are pretty much what Apollo went through. We have Captain Tyrum and Switch, which have been the most effective fungicides. But as he mentioned, when the weather conditions are favorable, even those good fungicides are not highly effective. The best thing you can get is really the weather that he says is coming ahead of you. The good sunny weather is really the best thing we can get to manage which is not what we can do to manage, but it's the best thing we can get to get it under some level of control. I don't know at what stage of fruit production you are in Australia right now, but these can affect the fruit as well. The symptoms on the fruit will be very similar to anthracnose caused by Coleotrochum. So, and even when you don't see as much disease on the leaves, you can still have a significant level of disease on the fruit. Like I said, I don't know if what you're dealing right in Australia right now, it's exactly the same as what we have in Florida. I'm hoping not, but I know Apollo for many years now, and we have already started discussing some collaboration and exchange of isolates, and I'll be happy to help and collaborate with him any way we can. At this point, I think I'll just maybe open for some questions. I didn't prepare any slides because I mainly wanted to hear from Apollo and see his pictures and what we have, and I might be given a presentation in a few weeks at the Australia Berry meeting.
Great. Thank you. Well, not great about the disease, but thank you very much for giving us your time and all of that kind of thing. So just so if I can kind of summarize this at a really top level, and I might get it wrong, so do correct me, that the Neop that we have here, we've always had Neop in some form or another, but potentially it could be a more virulent strain, or if that's the correct word, and that really the best solution is sunshine, but that's not something we can order from a shop. So we need to focus on cultural practices and the suite of chemistry that we have at the moment, and that there is no link, as far as I understand it, between, this is not something that the runner growers have done wrong or anything like that. It's just one of those things, is my understanding. And I guess the other thing is there are potentially some varietals that are more resistant. So I wonder, in terms of us making, using the sort of collective wisdom around the virtual table, it would probably be handy for us to understand if there are any observations, and not necessarily in this forum, around varietals that some that are doing better than others. Would that be useful?
Is that a question to me or?
Oh, anyone, you or Apollo, really?
In my current inquiries, I've only really had 3 or 4. I haven't had too many of Sun Drench or other varieties. I've had Florida Beauty, Red Rhapsody, Parisian Kiss, and Scarlet Rose. Right. But I think it's mainly, it's only probably 1 or 2 of those varieties that I've recovered the pathogen from, but I haven't had any or much of the others. And I don't know whether other growers are sending plants to confirm the pathogen somewhere else or not. But again, as mentioned, it'd be good to get as many or as variety if possible.
So can I check, does it cost the growers money to get that pathogen testing?
If you send it to a private lab, yes, it will.
Mm-hmm.
If you send it to me, I won't give you the fancy report. I will call you if I can recognize what it is. I will call you and tell you what it is. Mm-hmm. It won't be to species level though, right? Or everybody. It'll be the genus, which is the Neopestalotiopsis. Mm-hmm. But I won't be able to get it right through the species level. And that's the thing that Natalia was talking about in terms of, is this a more aggressive one or that? But I'm not sure how far you are with your work, Natalia, in terms of finding the species name, but I do know that there is 1 or 2 species going around in Australia, the rosé species and another one, but yeah, that's further work for the molecular biologist to do.
Yeah, and that takes time too, doesn't it, to get that down to that level of specificity. So I'm wondering, perhaps I could ask all of the growers who are concerned that they might have this disease, if you haven't already sent your samples to Apollo, can you please do so? Because
Happy to confirm.
that will start giving us, or take it, yeah, so that will start giving us a picture of, you know, the extent of this issue. And like you said, you know, there are other things around when you have a very wet season. It's, you know, it's basically a pest and disease field day. So, you know, don't just assume this is what you've got. Let's actually try and get some proper analysis, and I think it'll be really interesting. And I can see Jodie Neal was on the call. I'm not, Jodie, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here, Rachel.
Great. So Jodie, I think we can start feeding that information back through to you too, around whether there are any particular types that are coming up strongly. So I think in terms of that, that's there. So now I'd like to throw.
Right, Rachel, I do want to make a comment too about the diagnosis, because I think it's really important to emphasize there's a lot of Neopestalotiopsis is a common saprophyte. It's on many different hosts, and here in the US there's been quite a bit of confusion now. When growers send in samples to labs, they're not familiar with strawberries and not familiar with disease, and they're getting reports that, among many other things, their plants may have Neopestalotiopsis, which is not necessarily this aggressive pathogen that we are seeing in Florida. So there's a lot of unnecessary panic by diagnoses that are made by labs. They're not experienced with strawberries and with the disease. So especially if you're if those labs are isolating from plants that already decay or are in an advanced stage of decay, you're going to end up picking up a lot of things that are not necessarily the pathogen. I think it seems like pollen, it's in the right direction now by isolating from leaves. When you're isolating from leaves that have that extent of leaf spot that I see in the pictures, that's where you get the best chance to pick up the aggressive pathogen. There are a lot of other pathogens that cause leaf spots that are similar, and their growers can get confused too. I'd say my lab here in Florida never got so many samples with leaf spots of growers that are every single leaf spot. Now they think it's these and not necessarily. So getting a good diagnosis from somebody that's experienced with strawberry, I think it's really important to avoid panic in the industry.
That's I think a really good summary. So if we, you know, at this stage, if the plan is to send your plants to Apollo, and he said on the chat the whole plant, then, you know, we can start building that knowledge. I think then that there may be some opportunity for us to look at whether there's some mechanism that if we need to get more detailed analysis, whether that could be funded either through QSGA or Strawberries Australia or something like that. So we could look into that as an opportunity. I guess I'm conscious we've got a lot of people on the phone, on the call. So Apollo said up to 10 plants will be enough initially. Please include as much information too. So does everyone know how to get those plants to Apollo? Like, is this something that you're used to? Is there anything that you need to know?
Some do.
So can you give us some instructions on that, please?
Because now that I want to look at the leaves as well, because normally I would just get asked the growers to chop the leaves off, give me the crowns, but include as much of the leaves as well. So up to about 10 plants will be great. If you can wash the soil off, even better, so that it just takes me a bit faster to process. But yeah, if you can include the crown and some of the leaves as well, especially with the symptoms, that would be great. So I can do separate isolations on both, and I usually run it through different types of media as well, just to take out if there's a phytophthora event or something else. So, but yeah, 10 plants will be fine. I'm happy to give my email address or my mail address to Berries Australia, and you guys can just pass it on
Cool. So just so they don't, do they put it in a post bag and send it to you? Is that how it works? Or
Yeah, post bag's fine.
okay, cool.
It doesn't need to be refrigerated because I should get it within a couple of days. And
Okay.
the disease will just, if anything, it'll just incubate anyway. So it's even better.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's really kind of you, Apollo. And
Rachel, it's happened for many years. I'm
Yeah.
happy to receive. You guys support us as much as we support you. So
Yeah.
I'm happy to do the initial diagnostics. Like I said, it won't come out as an official U Beauty report, but I am in touch with many growers as some of your audience today.
Yeah.
But I will be straight and I will tell them what they have and what they don't have.
Yeah. And perhaps in a couple of weeks, once you've got a bit of a data set together, you can come back to us and tell us what sort of patterns you're seeing and we can communicate that out.
And if growers are concerned about the varieties, and even that's why I would like to get an even distribution or stretch, even for people who aren't getting any problems, I'm happy to hear from you as well.
Yeah.
Again, that just forms the profile for all of us. I think in my 20 years with industry, I do know the conditions that happen every year and what problems we've had every year. It's always separate problems every year, unfortunately. But if we do have another El Nino for 5 years, we may not see any Neopestalotiopsis, but obviously we're in the La Nina phase of.
We'll see something else. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. So guys, on like growers, any questions, comments, please? Okay, there's a question from Brendan for Natalia. Is there any knowledge on plant recoverability through the season from experience in Florida? It's early in our season. Are the plants likely to grow out if the weather is dry?
Yes, the ones that make it, because I see from the pictures there's been quite a bit of die out, and that usually happens when you get an infection early in the season, because in this case of this specific species, it seems like the infection, rather than coming from the bottom, from the roots and the crowns, it's coming from the top, from the leaves, and eventually it makes to the crown and the plants can die. Those plants, of course, are gone, but the plant, if you have dry weather and the plants are able to put enough new foliage to grow new roots and the weather stays dry, you can still get some production. But as I mentioned, even with the good weather, you might still get some fruit infections. So it's important to keep with the sprays. The sprays that the Tyram, Captain, and Switch will help to suppress that fruit infection. But yeah, if you have the good weather, those plants can still produce, and it's pretty much what we had this season in Florida. We did get some rain very early in the season, and then it dried out, and the plants were able to put up enough leaves and fruit and get good production. But they're mostly clean also to start with. It's a lot harder to manage these when you're starting with plants that might have come infected from the nurseries, which I'm not saying that was the case or what happened there. I'm saying that's what we observed in Florida. When we're starting with plants that were infected from the nursery, it was really hard to manage. We have much better chance if the plants start clean or not highly infected.
Thank you, Natalia. So the one quick question from Tom is, will it be soil borne now if we have it?
I won't be able to confirm or otherwise. Yeah, only because we haven't done much work on the pathogen, Rachel.
Yeah.
So where the sources are coming from, I can't be conclusive about it now.
Yeah. So Christy has asked a question there. So if the wet weather is the major reason why is this only being detected on plant material from certain nurseries? So I have heard, and again, I don't know this for sure, that it's really only coming out of the Stanthorpe runner growers, not Talangi or JCLM. What's your perspective on that, please?
I can confirm it's from more than one nursery. But in terms of why it isn't in in the southern ones. Again, I just haven't done too much work on the pathogen to be able to say anything. Maybe they have. I know that in Talangi they do have a different guideline for
They've got
fungicide.
methyl bromide, basically.
And also they can do off-label chemicals in the fungicides in Talangi.
Yeah, they can.
So again, I can't tell for certain why it is, but I have picked it up from 2 different runner sources. But in saying that, it's been 8 to 10 weeks now. The plants that I'm getting are from fruit farms, so I can't be certain. I mean, if I did get plants from the runners, that will tell me a better story if it is coming from them. But at this stage, all the samples that I've received are from fruit farms. So I'm thinking, you know, if it is everywhere and the conditions have been suitable for this pathogen to develop over the last 6 to 8 weeks. So for now, all I can say is, yeah, the plants are from fruit farms.
Yeah, maybe when people are sending in their samples, perhaps it would be useful if they could let us know where they sourced their plants from, which runner, just to see if there is a link between the location of the runner production and the disease. And I mean, would it be silly to say that obviously the Queensland runner growers have had the same very wet weather as everyone else has?
Yes, they did.
So it may well be, whilst it could potentially be attributed to those particular sites, it's not because they've done anything bad or wrong or anything like that. Is that reasonable?
Again, I can't say yes or no. The conditions have been wet over there too, but unless if I need to be very conclusive, I just haven't received any samples from them. So you know, I can't say that it is from them or they've had it. But yeah, it's something that obviously if people can send through those details at least,
Yeah.
Then obviously we can have a better story.
So we're still on a bit of a fact-finding mission, and I suppose the pieces of the puzzle that we're not really clear on are, you know, whether or not, you know, which varieties it seems to be more prevalent in, whether there is a link to particular locations of runner production or not. And so I think the more information we can get to Apollo, the more likely we can answer those questions. Just a quick question from me. You mentioned the 2 chemicals that are not registered for use in Queensland.
Yep.
Yeah. Would it be worth pursuing any emergency permits to control this or not?
Emergency, I think, stipulates that if you don't have any controls for it at all,
Yeah,
which we do.
Yeah.
And again, those 2 products we mentioned that seem to be working well in Florida, one of them is already in use in the nursery, and it will not be a good fit for fruit because of the long residual.
Yeah.
And the other one does leave a white residue in the fruit. And as mentioned, that wouldn't be a good case for our commodity.
Okay, so there's no real value in pursuing that. One, we probably wouldn't get it, and 2, it's probably not.
And Rachel, if we get another 4 weeks of rain, what good is that emergency product going to do?
Yeah, that's right. Can I just check, coming back to the questions, Michael has asked, are plugs less susceptible?
Not necessarily from what we've seen in Florida. When we have the wet conditions, and because these affects the foliage, it just moves very easily especially with rain, with wind, or workers that are working on the field. So it just moves very easily, and I haven't seen much difference between bare root and plugs.
Okay, good to know. Tom has asked, is Red Rhapsody less susceptible? My understanding it's one of the susceptible ones.
Well, just basing on the 15 samples that I've received probably 25% Red Rhapsody, and it hasn't been on that. But again, it's a very small pool of samples
Yeah.
to base on. But at this stage, it doesn't seem to be.
So Jen, what I'm thinking, obviously we've got a good roll up here, but it's not everyone. Perhaps we could, if it's not too much to ask, request everyone who is potentially seeing this on their crop to send their sample in, and also, you know, the basic information that they need to provide is what varietal and where did they source their runners from, and pop it in a post pack and send it to Apollo. We've got the address there, and that will at least start giving us a data set to work from. That's a bit more meaningful, and it's still, I mean, it wouldn't be something you could put in a scientific paper, but it might give us all a bit of insight into what's happening. And I think that's a useful starting point. So we have 7 minutes left. So are there any more questions or comments or anything that people on the Zoom, growers and others, would like to make? Okay, you're either all just feeling miserable or yes. And I mean, it is always frustrating, I think, when some things like this happen and there's no magic solution, and, you know, we can't control the weather, and that makes it really challenging and frustrating. I think, yeah, we'll keep you, as the more data we can get, we'll keep coming back and trying to keep you up to date with what's being found. Brendan's just popped another question in the chat saying, is it advisable to remove the diseased leaves from the plants? I'm assuming, Brendan, are you talking about doing that to try and manage the situation?
I would recommend so, just to, I mean, if growers have sprayed already and there's disease decaying plants still around, you know, if there's still mess around, I mean, that could be a potential entry for any pathogens to come in. So I would remove, or I would advise to remove as many. I know that you can't remove all the leaves, but if you've been able to do, I do remember we've had the sun since Friday week. So if you're able to spray Friday week and another one last week, if you're able to do some cleaning up and spray towards the end of the week, just to give that protection, because I do see there's more rain coming next week. So if you can remove as much of the disease leaves as possible, because the pathogen can colonize dead material as well. And so if there's dead material there and they come back, you know, it's a chance that not just Neopestalotiopsis, but others may be able to come in and infect and colonize. And obviously, if you can't go back in with continual or your weekly sprays, then it might just become another, you know, incursion of disease. So yes, please.
Okay.
This may be obvious because Australia growers might be smarter than Florida growers, but if you're gonna to spend the money to do that, please don't throw those leaves in the meadow and leave it there, because one of our growers, that's what well, actually a few of our growers, they were removing leaves and throwing them in the meadows, and that's not gonna do any good, because as Apollo said, it's gonna produce spores on those leaves, and when it rains, it's going to splash right back to your plant. So so if you're gonna take the expense to remove the leaves, you need to take them out of the field. Same thing for disease fruit. Another recommendation we have given in Florida, and again, that might be obvious, but I'm gonna say it anyway, is just if you have fields that are highly infected, I would recommend leave that field to harvest at the end. Start with your clean fields and finish on your disease fields, and from there send your workers home and have them to clean their shoes and wash their clothes before they come back the next day, because with all these years I've been working with strawberries, I never seen a pathogen that spreads as easily as this one does. As I mentioned earlier, the spores are very sticky to grower, to the harvesters, the pickers' hands and their clothes, especially if the plants are wet when they're working on them. And they can survive actually for several days on clothes and equipment and shoes. We have done that work as well. So if they go home from the dirty field at the end of the day, come back the next morning to the field that's clean, they're going to bring it back with them. So sanitation, not only plant sanitation, but the workers and equipment sanitation, as well as you finish the spray on those dirty fields at the end of the day, wash equipment and spray with some disinfectant before you bring them back to the clean fields the next day.
That's really great advice, Natalia. And I think, you know, it's easy to sort of forget these things, and on-farm biosecurity is always critical, but it sounds like this particular beastie, for a better word, is particularly susceptible to being spread like this. So I think, so Jen, we might do a bit of a summary of just some of the key hygiene steps and maybe add those 2 points from Natalia in there so that they're really obvious.
Yep.
Then we've got the plan that everyone's going to send their disease plants into Apollo with information about what variety they are and what runner farm they got them from, and then we will regroup probably in 4 weeks or so. Maybe we might have another webinar. Would people be interested in another webinar in, say, 4 to 5 weeks? Can you give me a thumbs up if that's something that you would like? Okay, a few people are saying yes. Yep, got some thumbs. Okay, that's great. We'll try and pull something together 4 to 5 weeks time, just to give you an update and see where we're up to. And hopefully it won't be, you know, we'll have 4 weeks of dry, windy weather. I'm
also happy to get, if anyone's leaving some diseased plants on the field, and make note if they have been able to spray those plants, just to see if the chemicals are actually working on those infections. So if I was to plate out those infections on the plates and nothing grows out of them, that's a sure kind of like, you can demonstrate that what they've been able to spray has been effective, if that makes sense.
I think too, Apollo, if you are feeling overwhelmed by, if you suddenly get, you know.
Yeah, I know, I'm thinking now, I get hundreds.
Yeah. So if there's some way that we can support you or work out a plan, you know.
I'll get my people to talk to your people, right?
That's right.
That's good.
Anyway, so I guess, you know, it's all great being like, yeah, I can do it. And then suddenly it's like, oh, here's 20 samples to look at. So if you need us to think of a different strategy about whether or not we send some to the labs or other labs, and, you know, whether we have a chat to QSGA or whatever to fund some of that, then, you know, there are ways and means. But I think, you know, we'll start.
I'll speak to Jen.
We'll start with this plan now, and if it goes off the rails, then we'll, if it's too much, we'll try and work out a new plan or a better plan or an extended plan. So yeah,
I'll come in and work for you for the day, Paula.
I'll get you in the cabinet, Jen.
I know it's school holidays coming up soon. Kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Oh,
Okay. Look, we're right on 11:01 now. Like, any final questions or comments? Okay. Well, once again, really big thanks to Apollo and Natalia for coming together at such short notice and, you know, giving us a really good understanding of what's going on. I think sometimes with these things, the worst thing is not knowing. And as we well know, there's a lot of, the strawberry industry does love a good rumor. So always good to get actually to some facts and move on from that position. And then we can also try and build our understanding of what's going on, and then we'll have even more facts, which is exciting. So thank you all for your time. I hope it's been useful, and we'll see you in 4 to 6 weeks. We'll just keep in touch with Apollo to see what the best timing is for a regroup, because there's no point coming back if there's no more new information. But if we've got something to say, then we'll let you know when it's on, and we'll say it. So thanks very much, everyone. And I do really feel for you. I know this is the last thing that you need. And I guess all I can say is we will try to do our best to support you through this situation. So thank you very much. And
Thanks,
hope
everyone.
to see you all at Berry Quest. Berry Quest, Berry Quest. Don't forget to sign up. Natalia, did you say you're going to be there?
Yes.
No, not in person, virtually.
Virtually. Well,
Yeah.
you know, it's really important to support our conference, and you know, this is a real opportunity to meet face to face, and Apollo's presenting, so make sure you register. See you there. It's just on the Gold Coast. Okay, bye everyone.
But
Bye.
we get some sunny weather.
Yes,
Trying.
yes, that's right.
Thanks, Natalia. I'm going to talk to you soon.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Natalia.
Rach and Jen.
No, we really appreciated it. Thanks, guys. Really, really appreciate it. Good to get, like I
We'll
said,
talk more this week, Apollo.
yeah. And you can go and finish watching Stranger Things and go to bed now, Natalia.
Oh, yeah. That's right. 9 o'clock, right?
Yes.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.